All right, so we are going to begin by introducing the UMass team, and then we will give you some more information about participating in today's session. Then we will introduce the panelists for tonight's event. The UMass Amherst team will help run today's webinar. My name is McKenna Meeker, and I am a sophomore pursuing a dual degree in public health and nutrition. I will be moderating the panel for today's webinar. Amelia, who will be moderating the chat, is a senior psychology major. Both of us are a part of the Student Alumni Association on campus. Lindsay McGrath is our advisor, and she's also here helping us. She is the Director of Student and Young Alumni Programs for the UMass Alumni Association. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Today's session will be recorded and later added to our online video library of career resources. By joining the session, you are giving consent to be a part of this recorded session. At the bottom of your screen, there is a chat box. We will be utilizing this tool to communicate with the audience throughout the panel. Amelia will be on hand to ensure audience questions are answered by panelists. We hope to get to as many questions as possible. Just to preview the sections that will be covered today, we're going to start with some questions related to COVID-19 specifically before doing a few opening questions, and then we will move into the subsections of transportation, housing, and budgeting, followed up by one last kind of advice question towards the end. So if your question falls into one of those categories, we will ask it within those categories, just so you kind of know the sequence of questions today. Please allow me to introduce our panelists. First, we have Shannon Barrett. Shannon graduated in 2016 with a degree in journalism and public and political science. She lives in South Bay and works as a production assistant at Fox Sports. In addition, we have Ushtar Boulous. Ushtar graduated in 2009 with a double degree in English and political science. She lives in Mid-City Koreatown and works as a research consultant at New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Our third panelist tonight is Miriam Tinberg. Miriam graduated in 2014 and majored in Middle Eastern Studies and Arabic. She now lives in the Echo Park area and works as a community manager for 5G Innovation Labs at Verizon. Now that everybody's been introduced, we're going to move on to the questions. So to kick things off, we do want to acknowledge that the majority of people are self-isolating right now in order to help curb the spread of the novel coronavirus. We understand this is an unprecedented situation, and we do want to address its impact before we get into the questions about what a city is typically like. We also hope that everyone is staying safe and that these challenging times will soon come to an end. So now specifically related to COVID-19, panelists, are you able to work remotely? And if so, how are you adjusting to the change?
I'll start. So I work for a telecom company, and as a result, most of my work was already done virtually. I don't know about you all, but most of my colleagues are not based near me. I imagine, Ashta, that's maybe the case for you, working with New Zealand people. But yeah, so I was on a lot of calls already, and a lot of like Google Hangouts, and mostly done via email. So for me, actually, what's been important now is not the transition from a in-person to virtual, but how do I maintain the balance when everything is totally virtual and I'm on, 8 hours straight of calls. So I don't know if we'll be speaking a little bit more to that, but I have tried to mitigate some of that I bought a cushion for my chair. I try to go outside to take meetings from my phone if I don't have to be on my screen. I watch TV when I'm eating lunch, trying to have quiet mornings. So for me, that's been the screen fatigue is really intense, but my actual day-to-day work has, if anything, just become more busy. So trying to figure out how to stay sane and healthy in those times are what I'm focusing on.
On the flip side, I work at Fox Sports. So usually I'm in an edit bay or traveling for either football, NASCAR, or golf. So right now, all of our travel is stopped, and obviously we can't go into work right now to edit. So we've figured out how to get our work desktops on our own laptops by using some type of a software. So we're working virtually and trying to Zoom call and edit. So our process is a little more complicated, but also we just have a lot less work right now because there aren't sports happening.
And I'm more in Miriam's camp where I just recently transitioned roles, but I've been working in a job that had me remote for quite a while. So it's, especially in LA where traffic is really bad. It's been really nice, honestly, not having to sit in traffic for an hour plus each way. And so instead I just pop my headphones in, make my coffee, and go for a walk in the neighborhood for an hour in the morning before work. So honestly, like that's been one of the really nice, I guess, like silver linings of everything.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. In addition, what resources specific to your city are helping you practice self-care during this time?
The gym I am at is doing online workout classes, so it's not necessarily the city putting this together, but they are doing Instagram live workouts and Zoom workouts now. So that is what I am doing for self-care. And I also downloaded the Calm app. So if I get frustrated by the people living in my house with me, which are my family right now, I just throw on one of those meditation apps. And I've never meditated before, but it's actually really nice right now. So that is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I would agree. So I can't think of any LA like city specific things, but I do think there are so many, and I know Ashtar specifically can speak to this, so many small businesses and restaurants and bars that are doing really cool stuff. So I think we all can relate to the fact that the creativity to come out of this is super interesting. So I last weekend went to a bar near me, posted on Instagram. They were doing these tequila, Campari, like grapefruit popsicles. And so you could order just 4 of them for like $20, and, you know, going there, mask and everything, supporting local business, you know, hanging out with the bartenders, picking up this product. Same thing with bookstores. There's some bookstores doing bundles where if you don't know what you want to get, but you know the genre, you can just say, surprise me, and they'll send it. I've been buying merch. If I don't want to always buy food, you can buy, like I bought a t-shirt from this local Chinese restaurant near me. So trying to figure out ways to support small businesses in the area and just, take advantage of that creativity. I don't know about you all, but I've actually found I'm less creative. I think it's due to this screen fatigue. Now I'm actually doing a lot less than I had hoped to do in this time. So being able to like hop on other people's creativity has given me a sense of comfort, and it's just really fun to, you know, buy like the alcohol popsicles and stuff. So
Yeah, I agree. And like there's, yeah, to hop on that, there's a taco place that was offering, like, you can order bundles where you can order like a tray of their carnitas and like tortillas and different salsas and stuff, and it can feed like 5 to 6 people. And it comes with like a 6-pack of toilet paper or something, right? So, which potentially not a great pairing. What kind of a
or maybe necessary.
But I think it was meant to be funny. But I think just kind of at a broader kind of political level, Mayor Garcetti of LA has been working really closely with Governor Newsom in California. And I have to say that I feel like we're in really capable hands. Like, I feel really lucky to be living in California right now as we're going through this. So I think it's not directly self-care, but it definitely eases my mind in terms of the kind of lack of federal leadership, and just feeling confident that at least like at a state and citywide level, we have more competent leadership. And like Garcetti and I think Newsom delivered this like 4-stage plan recently, and that all just makes me feel like there's someone who is talking to people, and it makes it a lot easier for us to focus on like our lives when we do feel confident that we have leaders that are doing the rest. So.
Thank you so much for sharing specific to COVID-19. I hope that we do not have to relive this kind of situation in the nearby future, but still good to know about some resources available and how California is dealing with it currently. So just a couple of opening questions. In you guys' opinion, what are the benefits of living in the city?
I can start. LA is a huge, huge, huge city. And it's not just like the city itself, but people will refer to LA and refer to a lot of like the nearby kind of like, for example, Shannon lives down in South Bay, and there's like Santa Monica's technically a different city, Beverly Hills. And, I mean, it's sprawling, right? It, you know, miles and miles away from each other, and there's lots of traffic. So I think I might be jumping a little bit ahead, but like moving out here, you have to really think about where your job's going to be in relation to where you decide to live. But living within the city provides a lot of benefits. It really depends on what kind of stuff you're into. I would say I love kind of mid-city because it's easy to get everywhere. And it also, I think there's so many different kinds of things to do. So but the public transportation here is not great, so I'll say that. But living in the city provides a lot of really cool opportunities to have access to really great food and different kinds of events. There's all sorts of concerts and movie events, and I mean, there's all sorts of things, benefits you can gain by living in the city and not kind of further out.
I think one specific example that comes to mind about living in the city is you can't beat this type of weather. Going to UMass for 4 years, and I love the seasons, but that snow is rough after a couple weeks. So being here and having great weather all the time allows for things like some of the skyscrapers in our area do movie nights. So they'll throw up this huge screen and you're at the top of the building. You can see the sunset over here. You're watching a movie. It's great views, things that I'm sure they have in other cities, but you might not be able to do year round. I like doing tennis. I can't do that year round in eastern states. And then mostly the beach. I mean, the beach is awesome. It's why I love being here. I can't imagine ever not living near a beach, and having a beach so close is awesome, even though it is closed currently to me.
Yeah, I mean, I won't harp. I think we could go off on like all the things that they mentioned. But for me, born and raised in New England, I didn't realize how white New England was, honestly, until I left and I studied abroad. And then, you know, being in LA, I think the diversity is by far the most noticeable thing for me. And when I fly back into Logan, it's frankly like really stark landing there. And so I think that's really important. I mean, we all live in really distinct parts of the city. So Ashtar and I both, well, Ashtar, you sort of like me, I guess, have a mix of Spanish and Korean in these neighborhoods, but it's crazy. I mean, I feel like I'm living abroad in a lot of the areas of the city, like Spanish everywhere, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Armenian, Arabic, if you go down to Orange County. And so that, I think, is definitely not understated. And so you can get everything from the food to the movies, like the film festivals. They have literally everything you can imagine here, to the bookstores. Like I used to live in, so Glendale, California has the largest Armenian community outside of Armenia. And so you go into the library and half of the library is in Armenian, which is just so interesting. And you sort of can forget that you're just in a big American city. So I think that's the coolest thing, and it will never not be exciting.
And Iranians, they call Westwood, they call it Tehrangeles.
Yep.
All right, thank you so much. Now, the next question that we have is kind of like a listing off just 3 different places that you think, in your opinion, are must-see places if you were to come and even just visit Los Angeles.
3 each or 3 total?
3 each.
Cool. I'll definitely say the Getty. I know it's probably one of the few touristy places in LA that I recommend. And honestly, more for the views than for the art. The Getty, for those who don't know, is this huge art museum that is funded by this former oil tycoon, John Paul Getty, who he also had Malibu, and it's also now an art museum. But the real one, like the actual museum that was first up in the Hollywood Hills, is stunning. It's like you have a view of Bel Air, you have a view of the whole city. The architecture of the museum itself is really just stunning. It's all like white and just really bright. There's a really gorgeous garden, and the views that you get from that museum are really, really outstanding. There's actually no cover charge to enter, though you don't have to pay any admission, just parking. But otherwise, it's really, so I definitely would say that is my number one. Number 2 is probably the Griffith Observatory, not the actual, but the hike to go, if you park kind of down below and then hike up to get to the observatory, and you can continue. There's another trail where you can see a nice view of the Hollywood sign, which again, it's like, for me, it's more about the actual activity, and there's people watching, and if you like sciencey stuff, there's kind of a mixture of a lot of different things. And bonus, it's like just north of Thai town, so you can go and beat up some pad Thai after. Great day. And third, honestly, I would probably say Olvera Street, which is right near Union Station, and it's this like one little like block. If you were like Anthony Bourdain, it was featured in one of his episodes. He goes to Olvera Street to eat taquitos that are in this like special avocado sauce. And so it's fun because there's like a lot of little stalls that sell like trinkets, you know, sandals, like Mexican like mugs and hats, and there's music and good food and snacks, and it's cool to just go and kind of like shop around, buy trinkets.
Thank you so much. Those places all sound so interesting.
Yeah.
Shannon and Miriam, what would you say are the top three?
I was going to say Griffith Observatory is one of mine because I love the views there, and I always take anyone who comes here there, I always take them to Santa Monica Pier. I never take them to the Hollywood Walk of Stars because it's just crazy over there.
Yeah.
And it's not worth it, honestly. But
Don't do it.
people want to go see it. They always want to see it, so I always end up taking them. But two places that are really quick day trips back and forth, Catalina Island. You take a 30, 40-minute ferry, and there's still buffalo on the island, which is kind of cool. But it's basically like going to Greece, except it's 30 minutes ferry from LA area. Another really cool part of LA I always take people to is just the Venice boardwalk. There's just a lot of cool stuff there, a lot of local stuff, local performers, things like that.
So I think, like Ashtar was saying about the hills, definitely if you haven't seen any pictures, although probably they're in every movie, so you've probably surely seen them, but Hollywood Hills and any of the mountains in the area, it's the most beautiful thing you can ever see, and it's shocking when you just sort of look out, and depending on where you live, you're surrounded by mountains. So a lot of my places actually are not specific spots, but for example, the Pacific Coast Highway, the PCH, if you just drive along it, and I don't actually do it that often because in normal times it'd be like an hour plus from my house, but it is amazing. And like every movie you can think of has scenes there, just sort of driving in a convertible, but it is so beautiful. And then Sunset Boulevard in general has some really cool spots, and it's just, I think the allure of LA has not like I still sort of I have to pinch myself that I live here now. And so just, I could walk on the streets and be like, oh my God, I live in LA. I'm in LA, the palm trees, the whole thing. So Sunset Boulevard is, I mean, the streets in LA are huge and they last forever, but particularly the Sunset Boulevard in Silver Lake is one of my favorites. And then the Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. And they have all of the things that you've seen on TV are really there. And sure, like the streets are really, there's a lot of trash and it's not the best at all times, but it's just so beautiful and lined with palm trees and bars and restaurants really close to each other and so much to see within walking distance, which is actually not common in LA. So you can actually feel like you're going from a destination to a destination. And it's just very picturesque. And then the third one is Echo Park Lake. And I would encourage you all to just Google it too. It's can be kind of janky for sure, especially in the late evening hours. But in the daytime, you can get on for like $20 a day for, they say an hour, but you could really stay for hours. You can get on the duck boats and just sort of go around, and there aren't that many small bodies of water in LA or really grassy areas. So, but this is a beautiful park and people just sit and read and you can see the views of downtown and just the hills. And it's beautiful.
Miriam, to give you a destination on the PCH, so the PCH runs right along the coast, like up into like Santa Barbara and beyond. But in Malibu, there's this amazing hike at Solstice Canyon, which is basically like it ends with this waterfall, but you hike through the ruins of a mansion that burned down in a forest fire, like back in the 80s. So you drive like 14 miles on the PCH through Santa Monica into Malibu, and you can wind up at this really incredible hike.
Wow. Okay. I thought you were going to suggest the Thai place that's on the PCH. I don't know if you know it, but that's
there, but because usually
another good
fruit from one of the fruit vendors. There's all these like vendors in LA. They just sell like, they have like things of fresh fruit and they just cut it up, stick it in a bowl, and they serve it with lime juice and then this thing called chamoy, which is like a fermented fruit sauce, and then tahine, which is like a spices like chili pepper, lime, and salt. So it's this like weird combination of like sour, tangy, sweet, spicy, salty. So good.
Well, I'll have to meet you there for one of those. Okay, so the next section is about UMass specifically, and in an effort to save time here, I'm going to combine these questions. So talking just a little bit about your job, and then to kind of hit on how your time at UMass prepared you for that job, and maybe what resources you used on campus to either help you get that job or decide you wanted to move to LA.
I'm gonna defer to Shannon and Miriam since I'm a little older, and so I didn't come here until years after I finished UMass.
Okay, thank you.
So in the journalism department, we had really great professors that helped us create reels, which is basically our resume to apply to tons and tons of stations. So I utilized my professors more than any type of a career services. In that way, I also was able to utilize some alumni that were in my department that I had never gone to UMass with. They graduated a year or two earlier, but I was able to connect with them and get their advice for the industry I was going into. So I actually moved to Oregon straight after UMass and lived there for 2 years, and have in the last year returned to LA, and that's because it is where my family is. So I am back home in a sense in LA.
Yeah, I will try to keep this short, but I have a lot to say on this topic. So I work in tech now, but as you all heard, I was in HFA, the College of Humanities and Fine Arts, so very different. Studied Middle Eastern studies and thought I was going to go on the international education path, and worked in study abroad for a bit, did nonprofits, and then kind of realized that I wanted to make a pivot. And so I think someone asked a question about what are the adjustments moving from East Coast to West. I don't know if this is a West Coast specific thing, but it's surely an LA thing, this idea of you don't actually apply for jobs, at least not in my industry. It's totally who you know. So that's how I ended up in this position. I just sort of met someone and tried to expand my community, which was literally my sister, who I moved out with, to try to just get like sheer quantities. And then of course, they know the people, and suddenly you've expanded. So that's sort of how I was able to get this current position. But when I was at UMass, if anyone else is in HFA, surely you probably went to career services and they didn't have like those nice one-sheeters about what are potential careers, which, I was like, do you have one for Middle Eastern studies? There were 5 people who studied Middle Eastern studies and graduated with me, so that wasn't a thing. But for me, I did things like, this is tangentially related, but I did a lot of like 5 college classes, and I got to meet a lot of people off UMass campus. And of course, those people have different connections and come from different places. And I keep in touch with a lot of the people now still that were in my, in my Amherst and Mount Holyoke classes specifically. And then I also I received a Fulbright grant from just Fulbright to live and teach English in Morocco for a year. And so I used the scholarships and grants office a lot, really worked really closely with them. And that, of course, just in general equipped me with skills to like be a better worker and the whole thing. So I could talk specifically about that afterwards if anyone wants to reach out to me individually to talk about that. But yeah, it's definitely been a circuitous route, as I think all sort of job paths are. And it's kind of hard to pinpoint how certain things you do maybe relate to other things, but I could talk about this forever. So if anyone wants to discuss like changing a career path or just sort of trying something random, I can definitely speak to that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if any questions in the chat come up, we can throw them in. But for the audience out there, we will be emailing out contact info for all 3 panelists. So if you do have any questions specific to any of the experiences, they have said that they would be willing to help with some guidance. So definitely take advantage of that afterwards. That'll be emailed out likely tomorrow. It sounded like Amelia had one question that fit into this category. Amelia?
Yeah, I actually kind of got 2, but I'll try to put them together just for the sake of time. So the first question, I know that Miriam, you kind of already answered this, so I don't know if you want to kind of expand on it or just let Shannon and Ashtar do it, but what were some adjustments that are major adjustments from UMass to LA? But I also think we could kind of intertwine in there. We had the question, what kind of assistance did you get from your company in terms of transitioning? And is that normal, or do most companies give assistance for people moving from far away? So I don't know if you guys can mush those all together just for time's sake, but.
I can start to answer as well. So I'll first start out by saying I moved to LA from DC. I actually lived in DC for 6 years before I moved to LA. I went and did a master's before I came out here. And so I was working in DC, and the job that I was with, they did give me a relocation stipend. So they gave me a few $1,000s to make they just gave me the stipend. They didn't ask me to like submit any receipts. They just gave me a certain amount of money and said you can use this toward your moving expenses. That being said, I received that because it was a promotion from within the company. So my sense of, in terms of relocation assistance, is it's generally speaking more likely you'll get it if you have an established relationship with your employer and the need to move is directly related to whatever role you're doing. So if this is a thing where you're just like, I just kind of want to live in the city, chances are you might not necessarily, depends on the employer, but less likely that they'll be able to financially support that. If it's a job that specifically requires you to be in another place, chances are they'll give you some form of assistance. That all being said, if this is an entry-level role, they'll probably prefer to hire someone already in the market so that they don't have to make those kinds of additional expenses. If they do, it's generally because you are uniquely qualified in some way and they really are wanting you. So you know, some companies may, but I don't necessarily know how likely or unlikely that is. So that being said, I will say like there's ways of moving kind of on the cheap. It depends on like what your priorities and preferences are. So if you were to move out here with not a lot of furniture or any, right? If you just like pack some suitcases and you can ship boxes, if you're not having to like ship furniture, then you don't have to like pay movers, right? So and the way that I found my movers was actually on this website. I think it was called like UShip, where basically it's almost like they can kind of do like a bidding on your move. So I just said like, I have a studio apartments amount of furniture, who wants to, this is how much I'm willing to pay. And then they basically, it's like I'm auctioning off like who wants to do my move. That being said, like it's just random people, right? So there's like a question of like how much you can trust. They're not necessarily like companies. So it depends on your level of comfort giving all of your worldly possessions to people who aren't, right? So that's up to you. I was willing to take this risk, but I was able to also move my stuff for a couple of $1,000s. So, you know.
So I moved home after UMass. So I moved from LA to Oregon, and my company gave a flat out $1,000, a big $1,000 to anyone that was going to work at the station in Oregon, no matter where you were in the country. So for most people, that meant gas money to drive whatever you could fit in your car to that area. Most of the people that I worked with at my first job came from the Midwest, East Coast. No one came from the Oregon areas, and everyone drove. I think only one person shipped their stuff, and it was extremely expensive, and they did that with support from their family. But everyone else drove what little they had in terms of anything like valuable or your clothes, and then just bought all your furniture on a free or for sale local Facebook group when you got there. Because you don't really need nice stuff your first apartment or your first move after college. So I would really recommend, if you have a car or have like a cheap way to get there. Some people flew on an airplane with 3 suitcases and then started that way. So just depending on your budget, you can do different things.
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly. I'm seeing some questions coming in about the adjustments from east to west. So I feel like when we get to the how do you make friends section, I can talk about that, because that was by far the biggest adjustment. Was like really, really hard to make friends in the city. Yeah, for me, I also got a cool 1,000, and I actually applied for a position that was called campus coordinator. It was for CIEE, which is a study abroad nonprofit, and it was a Los Angeles campus coordinator. So I explicitly was looking for positions that were going to move me out here. To Ashtar's point, if you find an LA-based position, there definitely is flexibility. They are a nonprofit and gave me $1,000, and it was a reimbursement situation. And even still, I'm a couple years out from that. I hate reimbursements. I really, really would just rather get the money fronted than have to wait. So that was really rough. And I chose to not spend all of that, because I moved with my sister, and my sister is a mechanical engineer. And so she got a job for NASA for the Jet Propulsion Lab out here. And so they gave her like thousands of dollars basically. And they said you could move up to 35,000 pounds. So I moved my car and everything. And I looked up how much would it cost to move the car cross country. And it's like $3,500 or $2,000 or some crazy thing. So I would not have been able to afford that with my $1,000. So I would say for those of you in STEM, you're probably like, I would imagine gonna be seeing probably higher salaries in general for an entry level, but then also some of these perks. Obviously it's not guaranteed, but I would imagine coming from nonprofit, like you would get way more. So yes, definitely. And I think, I don't know if we get onto the car conversation, but the debate of to get a car to not, definitely I think like getting a car it's worth the money to ship your car out. It's just like a quality of life thing.
Well, that's under the East to West Coast adjustment thing, right? Because I didn't have a car until I moved out here. That was a major adjustment. I lived in DC where I didn't need a car. I lived there for 6 years without one and did not feel the loss of it. DC is a much smaller city with a much more well-developed public transportation system. I rode my bike. That was my primary form of transportation. The bike like roads, it's just much more well-developed. There's more driver awareness of bikers. So it was just a better bike. And I think Boston's that way as well. Boston is despite the weather. But that was like, I actually, yeah. If you're planning, my recommendation, if you really want to be able to take advantage, like full advantage of everything LA has to offer, have a car. It's really challenging to really experience this city without one. And I bought one once I got out here, so I didn't have to deal with like either driving it or shipping it. I just bought one once I got out here.
Thank you. So that kind of segued us very nicely right into transportation and talking about those kinds of questions. So on the topic of cars, how do you guys get to and from work? I know someone mentioned that the public transportation, in their opinion, wasn't great. So I think that it would be helpful to just kind of touch on what public transport there is and whether or not you take your car to work, or how that looks, the commute for you.
So I'm mixed. I recently, like I said, I just transitioned roles, but previously I was working in a job that was downtown, and I used to take the bus because there was one bus that went directly there without having to transfer at all, and it was easily walkable, the bus stop, because the traffic here is so bad that I would prefer to not have to drive, because when you're on a bus or in a train, you can listen to podcasts, you can, be on a phone call, read a book, whatever, and not have to worry as much. But it really, what's difficult when I say public transportation is bad, it's really the bigger issues too, that the city is just so huge, right? So it's really difficult no matter what you do. Distances are far, so the time to get there is always going to take more time, and there might be more transfers and stuff. So I prefer, when I can, to use public transportation to avoid having to deal with not just parking, but not just traffic, but then finding a parking spot and like dealing with paying your meter and all of those like street sweeping and all those signs and stuff. But now I drive to work, and I have to drive to Santa Monica, which is only 8 miles, but will take me an hour to get there.
So that kind of answers, just to interrupt real quick, but someone just asked, is the traffic really as bad as they say? So would you guys all agree that yes, you would say so?
Yeah, so I work like 12 miles from where I live, which in East Coast standards is insanely far, but by LA standards, like that's about average. But I traverse the entire city from east to west, and I'm going in the direction of traffic. So it's probably like an hour 20 each way. But I have to say, like, everyone's always really negative about the traffic, and sure, like my back is definitely broken forever probably from the car. But despite that, it's still worth it. And I feel like that's the positive spin. Like I don't think I would live in the city forever for a variety of reasons. Mainly the houses are, I think on average, $700,000 for like a 600 square foot place. So that's like the main reason. But I think you learn to make your life small, which I haven't really done. And I acknowledge that. But most of my friends live where I live, and most of the things I do are where I live. And so it's still worth it because of all the other things we talked about, the diversity, the food, the sun. So yes, but I have gotten very acquainted with podcasts and that's just sort of a reality. So I try to figure out ways, how can I get a drink here, do a happy hour thing here, how can I, and also people in LA are I've never seen such flexible and different work hours than I have out here. I mean, you can depending on your workplace, but specifically in tech, you can come in at 10:30 and leave at like 4:30, or you can get there at 6 a.m. and leave at 3. Like people, that's super common. And that's a very real thing. And it's not a small understated thing. Like that is how people live their lives, is by traffic patterns. So you make it work, and I think it's definitely still worth it.
Yeah, I think
I'll touch on it super quickly too. Depending on when I come into work, if I'm leaving work around 9, which sometimes I do if it's in the middle of NFL season, it only takes me 35 minutes to get home if I'm leaving at the right time, which is why a lot of people work out at the gym on our studio lot right after work so that they miss the huge traffic flow of things. So traffic is bad, but we're also revamping our public transportation system for the Olympics in LA. That will be, I think, in 2028. We have the Summer Olympics here. So they are revamping our entire metro system so that it reaches farther out so people can come for the Olympics and come in and out of the city faster. So I don't know what that looks like yet, but that's in the works right now.
Good to know. That'll be exciting to see how that plays out for the Olympics purposes. So I think that pretty much covers transportation. Moving on to housing. I know that this was sort of mentioned, making friends in a new city, or for Shannon back at home, but kind of moving and getting acquainted. How did you decide where in the city you wanted to live? And how did you, if you were moving alone, I know, Miriam, you said you were moving with your sister, so maybe this part doesn't really apply to you, but how did you figure out who you wanted to, or find someone to live with, or how did that look for you guys?
I can start. So I moved out here by myself. I moved out for a job. I didn't know anybody really out here before I came out here. So I had decided to live alone. It was a choice that I made. I knew it was going to cost more money, but it was just at a certain point in my life where I made that preference. I did use Craigslist. I use this Pad Mapper. There's a bunch of those like finding housing apps, which everybody's always so worried about scams with Craigslist. You just have to really be smart. I've only ever really used Craigslist when I've moved quite a bit, so I've always used it to find an apartment. You just have to really don't rent a place sight unseen. Make sure you go there, make sure you meet the person, like do all those smart things. And I'd never been to LA. I was living in DC when I got the job offer and accepted it. So I flew out here for like a week to do a leadership offsite with my team. And before I came out here, I was like scouring Craigslist, setting up appointments to meet different landlords. And I made a spreadsheet of just all of the things that I cared about, right? Like rent costs, the size of the place, whether it included parking or not, whether it included laundry. A weird thing about LA, a lot of apartments don't come with refrigerators. So I had a column for whether it had a refrigerator or not, or if I'd have to buy one.
Weird, yeah.
I had like 12 places. So I rented a car, visited all these apartments and made notes on my spreadsheet, and then made a decision based on like whichever one I liked most, that was most in my budget and hit the majority of. And I also luckily, like I did have one friend who's from this area, didn't live there at the time, but I asked his opinion about like the safety of the neighborhoods, because my radar with that is just absolute trash. I'm not good at like knowing whether a neighborhood is like safe or not. So that was kind of how I decided. The other thing I'll say is, for my job, I had to be traveling to different parts of the city every day. Some days I was going to Beverly Hills, some days I was going south to Torrance, some days to West Hollywood, downtown, Santa Monica. So it was kind of all over the place. That was why I decided to live centrally. I didn't want to be like super far from any one place. And being central made it easier for me to get kind of everywhere. But I will say, if you already have a job lined up, or you know kind of like where you think you'll be working, choose your housing based off of where you're likely to be working, because traffic here is that bad, and so your life will be just so much more enjoyable if you're not spending 4 hours of your day in a car by yourself.
Yeah, I just add to that. I was thinking as this, you were talking, Ashtar, that I remember before I started UMass, I went on all the blogs and there was like these YouTube videos that were popular at the time to find. There was one from the Mission Improbable, right? That like sketch group, I think that's what it was called, about like the stereotypes of each of the areas, and like Northeast had the nerds and Southwest had the party people and all that stuff. And so I think the same is true of LA to a certain extent. And I think the three of us probably have somewhat similar impressions of each of the areas if we know them. So if you are interested in those kind of like stereotypes / overall vibes of the areas, would definitely recommend just reaching out to us. But for me, the decision I made is I live with my sister, so we have to find a centrally located thing for our works, but both of us actually work on the west side and we live on the east side. But even still, after living here, I've decided that this is more of a vibe that I want to have my evenings and my weekends at. And so I'm making a compromise, at least right now, and I'm going to just do it until the pros no longer outweigh the cons, that I want to have a certain vibe. And so that's just, I think the vibe and the atmosphere and what types of stores, like they all have very distinct areas too. And also where, to Ashtar's point, jobs tend to be located in certain areas as well. So where I work is definitely more of the tech, they call it Silicon Beach. It's where like YouTube, Google, Facebook, like all those offices are. Downtown has more of the art studios, maybe more of the financial stuff. So that's also something, but overall just do the research like you did for UMass and you can find a lot of stuff online. And then you might not get it right the first time, but usually leases are year long and then you can, get out. And at that point you'll be much more, like have a much better sense of the city.
I'll quickly touch on making friends because I had to make more friends because a lot of my friends that were here when I was growing up are gone. Everyone in LA, in my opinion, is super friendly and willing to help and outgoing. I hope both of you have had the same experience. I do think that's a different vibe in general from the East Coast. I would say I'm pretty confident that is a different vibe than the East Coast. If I were to stop someone in New York City in the middle of wherever there's a ton of people and ask them for help, I'm not sure if I would get the same amount of time and kindness that I would doing that in LA. I just think while it may be difficult to find friends that maybe have similar interests, that's why I would highly suggest wherever you live, because every place I've moved to, find an activity that you like. And then usually that's kind of where I find my home base of friends. And in that way, I think it's actually easier to make friends moving to LA as opposed to maybe another city where friendliness isn't associated with its culture.
I actually think friend making here is really, really hard. It's been hard for me, but I also am older than you, Shannon. So it could for me also partially be point in life where I'm at an age where people are getting married and cohabitating and they're just not as able or willing to be social. I would say actually Miriam and I met because of a UMass alumni event that we were both at, and because like she recognized me from another like dance class we'd taken together. So like she struck up conversation and we had similar interests, and then she invited me to a book club she'd organized, and so then I met like all of these amazing women through Miriam. So like I will say I will say my recommendation is don't be afraid to do things on your own that satisfy your own curiosity and your own interests. Once I started like challenging myself to go to that, like to a book event or something, and I like initially was like, I don't really want to go by myself, but I went, then you'll start to meet people, you'll start to see people that have a similar interest. So don't be afraid to go to something even if it's by yourself. I go to a lot of plays by myself. I go to a lot of like literary events, and then you'll just kind of naturally strike up conversation with people who also have those interests, and then they might introduce you to other people. I will say that I didn't view it this way at the time, but the unique benefit of being single when I moved out here. And what that showed me really was just like, it was like rapid fire. I was learning places in LA that I learned this city so fast because I was going on so many like first dates where I was like constantly discovering a new bar or a restaurant or a place to get ice cream, right?
Yes.
So then I was like driving all over the city, discovering new neighborhoods, I also was like a Lyft driver, partially because I wanted to like learn just like navigate city. So there's ways you can like get to know the city that might not seem immediately obvious, but I'm not encouraging anybody to break up with their significant other for the sake of learning this.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that that's definitely helpful information, as I know a lot of UMass, I have a lot of friends at UMass that are, out of state, but most of my friends are in-state students. So moving across the country, definitely a little bit intimidating. So definitely helpful to hear some friend-making tips. The last section we have is about budgeting. And I'm going to combine these questions just in the effort of time and trying to get off within the hour. So I know that you guys kind of touched on when you moved out to the city, but when you, for you, Ashtar, if it's to DC and that's easier to explain, that's totally fine. But how did you budget your finances coming out of college in order to move to a city? And were there any expenses that, I know talking about moving your stuff is kind of an unexpected expense, but any other unexpected expenses that came your way that you weren't necessarily prepared for?
It's a great question. I mean, the cost of living is pretty high, but it's actually I don't think any higher than Boston at this point. But you pay for things like water, which I'd never paid for in Amherst before. And water is definitely expensive out here. Yeah, I mean, the job I got when I started paid me $30K. And the whole thing they say about like, you shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your salary on rent is just ridiculous for people our age. So I would say I spent like 60 at least. And you just sort of have to decide what's important for you. Is saving money important versus living in a nice place versus retirement, whatever it is, like just sort of figure that out. I will say that the cost of living, or the standard of living, what's the right word? Like salaries, as a result of the cost of living, salaries tend to be much higher here. I think particularly in tech, not that I'm making that much, but this is what I hear. The potential is far greater. And so that's something, I mean, if you're in tech, you could be making like 100K by the time you're 28. Like that's a possibility that was not in my frame of reference at all. Like I didn't know anyone making anything near that much in Amherst. So that's a very real thing. And also just more so there are industries here that don't exist. This is the main pull for me for LA. Like the reason why I want to stay here for a while, there are industries that don't exist in Rhode Island or Massachusetts that I never would have entered otherwise. And I don't know where it's headed in terms of salary, in terms of career trajectory, in terms of my interests. And so just like rent and all these, these expenses are definitely, they add up for sure. But I think the potential to have like these surprise stream of incomes or just like these interesting side hustles, I think are really interesting and unique about LA. So for me, there wasn't any, besides just the regular like crazy rent costs, they're actually, and just, filling up my tank like once a week as opposed to once every couple of weeks in Amherst. I wasn't actually caught that off guard. Yeah.
Definitely a nice perk about Amherst.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I would say that budgeting wise, I really started to do that once I moved out from UMass because I never lived off campus. I was an RA for 3 years after my freshman year. So moving to Oregon was my first experience needing to budget. So really figuring out, do I need to get a gel manicure every 2 weeks or can I paint my own nails? Doing that just because I have student loans now. I have other costs that I wasn't paying in college, and figuring out that refinancing student loans actually was super helpful for me. I didn't do that until 3 years after college, and I wish I did it a lot sooner. So just getting a Google spreadsheet, super easy, and putting down exactly what you pay for, what you need to pay for every single month. Seeing what that is, seeing if you're okay with that and can even afford that, and then just going from there. Because a lot of people that I know don't even have budgets, so they don't know what they're spending or what they're taking in, and it's kind of, is this card gonna cover this meal? I'm not sure, let's play a game. So just like being more organized and knowing what you need, so that way you know exactly where you can live, what you can afford to buy, what kind of car you could buy if you need to buy a car, how often can you go out and be social and spend money doing that versus how often do I need to find free events, just things like that. It really helps just to write everything down.
Yeah, I would just add that I think about Amherst and how few grocery store options there are, and how few cheap food options there are.
Yeah.
And LA is totally different. You can get the most bougiest grocery store that like Hailey Bieber shops at, and then you can get, you know, like the local bodega or the grocery store near me called Numero Uno, which is literally so much cheaper than the other ones. So that is really interesting. There's just a diversity of options. And to Ashtar's point, going out doesn't have to be super expensive. Like tacos are literally, I mean, this is probably my favorite thing about LA. The taco trucks, you can get like 3 tacos for $4. And it's like a, you know, a full meal. So that obviously doesn't exist in Amherst. And then the fruit sellers that you can for $5 get this huge plate of fresh fruit. So there's just there are more options for the overall budget. You're not restricted in terms of how much meat is or produce. You can get produce. Like the guy comes and does his horn and then opens up the back of his truck and just sells his mangoes on my street. Yep. So this stuff is common. Yeah. I mean, it really feels like I'm abroad. It truly does. So, yeah, you'll get smart. You'll figure out where the cheap stuff is, and you make it work. So I actually think overall I'm spending less money on things like groceries than I did in Amherst. If I were to compare kind of the ratios, I'm doing it much smarter now.
Totally agree. Is that we all have to go get tacos when we come to LA is the overarching theme here. So just in the effort of time, I'm going to kind of close out the presentation aspect, and then I have just one more final wrap-up question for each of you. So let me just turn on presentation. Ooh.
I think that.
If it will go, that would be helpful. So we want to thank all of our panelists for joining us tonight, and we hope that all of the audience leaves the session with some more information about a new city. But before we conclude, we just wanted to let our audience know that the UMass Amherst Alumni Association provides career support, including the alumni advisors, where students can go get advice from alumni. We also have career counselors who can guide you on your career path. And in addition, there are many events held throughout the year, and we have many virtual events going on right now to help support you. We hope you will check out these additional resources at umassalumni.com/career. So as our kind of final wrap-up question, what advice would you give to students that are planning on making this move to LA, whether that is like just one overarching theme or however you interpret that question? We would love to hear.
I will start. I have 2. The first piece of advice is just an overarching general kind of getting job advice, which is do a lot of informational interviews. Go on LinkedIn and type in UMass Amherst. Like for me, I did like UMass Middle Eastern Studies, UMass Tech Los Angeles, like whatever it is, and then go ham like messaging and trying to connect with people. And like now that you know the 3 of us, email me. Now I'm instantly a connection, and I can open you up to my whole world of connections we can get on. I did so many phone calls with people who are out here just to figure out what does your job title even mean, because I didn't even understand sort of the world of jobs and companies out here. So figure out what the product manager is from the coordinator from the this and that to understand what salaries you should be ballparking, what types of keywords to put in job searches. So that's something really actionable to do now, is to just start making a list of informational interviews. And you can do easily like 6 a week or something, 1 a day, a couple a day. And you can go out in LA. We have Hulu, Netflix, YouTube, Google, Facebook, like all of these companies. Spotify just opened up this huge office downtown. So really be creative with that. And I think a lot of those companies are actually still hiring now in the Corona times. And then the second piece of advice is more to Ashtar's point of, don't be afraid to do things by yourself. I have gone to so many concerts, book things, like religious services, because I was curious, like restaurants. I did this recently last year for the first time. Go to a bar and open up a book and sit there, because I was doing a thing. I felt sad that I didn't have any plans that week and I didn't have anyone to see. So I just sort of went and did a thing myself. So the more you do that, the more people you meet, the more comfortable you get with small talk. And then like Ashtar said, it just takes one person. So one person who will intro you to their friends and their friends. And so would definitely encourage you to just sort of, if you're at all curious, just do it. And then also in this city, so many people are sitting in their houses alone, wishing they knew people. So once you realize that, that's really reassuring as well. Yeah, but I would say you just sort of only have one shot to do this stuff. So why not? And for the case for me, I'm very lucky. I could move back home, back to Rhode Island if I needed and sort of start again. And I imagine some of you are in that situation. So I would recommend taking advantage of that and really trying, like LA is a whole other world.
I have two bits of advice. I guess one is kind of LA specific and one is just kind of broader like life advice. So one, for LA specific, I would say don't believe all of the stereotypes you've heard about LA.
Yes.
LA, this was not a city I ever like desired to live in. It was never like, not that I hated, I didn't really think much of it at all, and kind of wound up here by happenstance, had a job opportunity and took it. And I've loved it. A lot of my friends did not think that I would because they believed the superficial reputation that LA has, and that exists, but it contains multitudes. There's so much here that I didn't know existed. There's so many different industries aside from the entertainment industry that exist here. There's just like a wide variety of people, industry, activities. There's the food here. I'm such a foodie, so if you need a taco tour, I got you. Like,
Or an Excel spreadsheet of all the restaurants with ratings.
Spreadsheet, I am a Yelp elite, like the whole deal. But LA is just not what I expected, and I cannot say enough good things about this city. So if you decide to move out here, it truly is a wondrous place. Do not like expect it to be what you've heard about only, right? It is those things, but it's also so much more than that. The kind of bigger piece of advice that I will share, kind of like tying into so I'll say I graduated from undergrad in 2009 in the midst of a recession. And so I know there's probably a lot of anxiety that you guys are feeling in terms of entering a job market right now. And I will and it sucks. And I will just affirm that and say that, yes, you have every reason to be anxious, but don't let that be the only thing that drives you. And think about, like, ask yourself, are there other ways that I could be approaching this, right? Are there other ways? Because the truth is, like, it means anything's possible, right? It's not what you expected, but that's okay. It means there's endless opportunities, and maybe sometimes we just need to be a little bit more creative with the way that we understand the reality of a situation. So I also am going through a job transition. If that offers any kind of comfort, I graduated into a recession and am now job searching once again in the midst of this time. So a lot of people, I think, are going through what you're going through, and it's okay to have bad days, and it's okay to feel down, and don't force yourself in the midst of this toxic positivity, right, movement to feel like good vibes only. That's not right. It's okay to have shitty days. It's okay. But reach out to your friends and think about, like, maybe you're the person to create something new and cool. Write a blog, right? Create a podcast with your bro. Like, do whatever you got to do to get through and do something cool, and you never know where it will lead. So just challenge yourself to think more creatively about the challenges that are in front of you, and how that could lead you down a path you hadn't thought of before. So that's I'll sit down now.
Well, I'm inspired.
Thank you
I
so
love
much
all of that.
for sharing that. I know that a lot of our seniors, Amelia as one of them, as the president of our Student Alumni Association, has peers, and herself has had some thoughts about those kinds of situations. So, I mean, I am a sophomore, so I'm not as directly impacted, but just on behalf of all of the seniors and juniors on this call with internships, thank you very much for bringing that up, because I know that has definitely been a worry for my peers. So thank you. And then, Shannon, do you want to finish us up?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what you both said, but I'll just reiterate. I moved to UMass, didn't know anyone my freshman year when I was 18, and then moved again to Oregon for my first job, didn't know anyone there. And I would say it's the best time, not that I know what it's like to be 30 or 40, but I've been told it's the best time to move around and explore different parts of the country right now when you're younger and don't necessarily have a ton of attachments and things that would prevent you from being able to move. So if you've always wanted to try LA, try a new place, whether it's LA or a different city that's super far from home, don't be scared, be excited, because this is the time where you can make that happen. And also, I would say, once you get to that new place, try and get as involved as you can where you are, so that you don't have to feel as lonely. When I was in Oregon, I didn't have family to rely on, so I joined a few different things outside of work, and I was able to feel a connection to the community within a couple weeks. So I would say take that chance right now and try and get integrated into whatever community you move to as soon as possible when you get there.
All right. Thank you guys so much. You all had such depth in your answers, which was really helpful and insightful on so many different topics that weren't necessarily specifically brought up. So thank you so much for giving us your time and your advice. And we really, really appreciate it. And thank you, audience, for coming. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.